Hi, folks. Welcome. We'll get started in just about another minute. We'll wait for a couple more people to join. Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started with introductions. Thank you all for joining us tonight. This is the National Catholic College Admission Association panel presentation number 1 of several this evening. We hope you're able to join us for a lot of them. And this session will be about applying to schools in the US. So some general information you'll want to be aware of, some tips and tricks, some vocabulary to look out for as well. But we'll start things off just by introducing ourselves. We do have representatives from each of these universities here tonight. My name is Rachel Skolton, and I'm the Director of International Admission at Loyola University, Maryland. Ryan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Ryan Conkright, and I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admission at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas. And I will pass it on to Mr. Ron Beck.
Thank you, Ryan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Beck, and I'm the Director of International Recruitment and Admissions at Salve Regina University in Newport, Rhode Island. Welcome. I hope we have some good information for you tonight. Jason, why don't you go next?
Great, thanks. Hello, my name is Jason Opdyke. I'm the Senior Director of International Admission at the University of San Francisco. And I will pass it on to our last presenter.
Hey everyone, my name is Paul Mucciaroni. I'm with St. John's University in New York City, and I am the recruitment manager for Latin America and the Caribbean.
Wonderful. Ryan, would you like to advance the slides? Thank you. So I'll kick us off. The US is highly decentralized when it comes to university admission. So that means that each university is going to have their own process, their own policies, their own deadlines, their own requirements. But there are some general terms that you will see across a lot of different universities. And understanding those terms is really the key to kind of understanding what the admission process is. What is that particular school looking for from you? So getting started with a few terms and definitions can really help prepare you for the college application process, so you can understand what you're reading on those websites when you're exploring the different schools that you're interested in. So at its most basic, all universities will be asking you for an application form. So this form will collect demographic information, biographic information, contact details for you, your address, your email address. It'll ask about your plans for study, what is it that you're interested in doing, which term are you applying for. Many universities have their own institutional application that they've developed themselves, and it can only be used at their institution. So if a university requires their own institutional form, you will need to fill out that form and not any other form in order to apply to that university or college. But there are other options as well. So some universities use multiple forms. So the common application form is a way that students who are planning to apply to multiple schools in the US can fill out that application form one time and send it to multiple universities. Many hundreds of US universities and colleges do use the common application form. So this is a really good form to be aware of if you know already that you're planning to kind of apply for several different schools, see what information you get back from them. And then the cohort application is for when an institution has a department or a specific program that may have more selective requirements than the general requirements. They may have separate application forms. They may have separate documents that they require. They may have a separate review process. So this could be something like going directly into a cohort program for nursing, direct admission rather than coming in undecided or with an intended major or pre-nursing. This is less common, and this is going to be more if you're applying to something really specific and highly selective, and it will be very apparent if the program you're interested in is going to require a special cohort application. And then we have the coalition application, and that is similar to the common application, where the idea is to allow students that want to apply to multiple universities to use a single application form and be able to send that information to the different institutions. Some universities are going to use a combination of these forms. And when that happens, it's just up to the student to decide what's most convenient for them. If you're applying to 4 schools and all 4 use the common application, but one of them uses an institutional application and gives you the option, it's going to be easier for you to just use the common application for those 4 instead of using the common application for 3 and then doing a separate institutional application. So you'll be able to find this information easily on institutions' websites, and it's a good idea to keep track of your research as you do it. So you could keep a table, or you could keep a spreadsheet that indicates which application form a university or college that you're interested in accepts, and then a link to their web page that has the information on how to apply. That'll stand you in good stead when you're ready to go through that process. And then once the application forms and documents have all been sent in, we move into the application review process. Probably most of the universities here do use a holistic review process. And what that means is that we're looking at the application as a whole. So we don't have a minimum cutoff or some computer program that's running overnight looking at the GPA only and either admitting automatically or denying automatically. Holistic application review means that an admission officer or an admission committee will be reviewing the application file, including all materials that are submitted. To give an example, my institution doesn't only ask for transcripts, we're also going to ask for letters of recommendation and for a personal essay so that we can get to know the student a little bit better as a person. And then some institutions do use threshold admission, where they may have a certain GPA minimum, or in some cases a certain test score minimum. And if a student is meeting that, they will be admitted. Other institutions, particularly community colleges, may have an open enrollment application model. And that essentially means as long as they've met a certain threshold for entry, for example, if a student has graduated from high school or has the equivalent diploma to a US high school diploma, they may be admitted regardless of their GPA. And then for testing policies, there's been a lot of changes to testing policies recently, so definitely good to understand these terms. It's really important to understand that when schools are posting this information, test optional, test flexible, test blind, this is typically going to refer specifically to the SAT or ACT tests and not to tests of English. So it's important to keep that distinction in mind. Test optional means it's up to the student to decide whether they would like to send in an SAT or ACT score, or if they don't want that to be considered as part of their application. Test flexible means that the university does require some type of standardized exam, but they are flexible in that requirement. So they will provide a list of different tests that they would accept, and you would only need to take one of them. So for some schools that may include a test of English, or it may include things like British A-levels or like international baccalaureate exams. And this, again, it's going to be different at different schools. So if you are interested in multiple schools that say they have a test flexible policy, again, you're going to want to carefully check what that policy is at that specific institution, because it may differ from the next institution that you look at. And then test blind is for institutions who have decided, even if a student wanted to send in their SAT or ACT scores, they've decided they will not consider those exams for admission for any student. So student types, this is important to talk about as well. For students who are US citizens and are living abroad, maybe their parents are international businessmen or diplomats, you would still be considered a domestic student. So that's going to be based on citizenship rather than on your current address, or rather than on where you're attending high school. However, you may be assigned to an international admission counselor if they happen to have a relationship with that high school or travel to that area where you're studying. So it's just important to keep that distinction in mind as well. There will be different processes for financial aid depending on your citizenship status. And then typically at most universities, an international student is just anyone who would require a visa to study in the United States. And again, it's important to understand that distinction because there will be additional requirements in order to obtain that visa. And the universities you're applying to will guide you through that. Application deadlines. So there are a few different timelines that are common in US university admissions. Early decision is a process where the students apply early, they get a decision back early, but they are required then to either commit to that school or to withdraw. So that is an instance where you would only apply early decision to a school that you know, this is my top choice. If I get in, I don't even want to consider other institutions. Early action is similar to early decision, but it's non-binding. So you apply a little bit earlier, you get your decision back a little bit earlier, but then you have until that national candidates reply deadline, May 1st, to make your final decision of where you want to go to commit to attending college in the fall. Regular decision is a similar timeline. It will just happen a little bit later than early action. And then some institutions will have a rolling admission process. And that means they will consider applications as they become complete and they release decisions on a rolling schedule. And Ryan, you can take it away for the next slide.
Sorry about that. I was just unmuting myself. Thanks, Rachel, for that great information. I'm going to continue on just with a brief overview of some more terms and definitions for you all. And I know we have some, the rest of the panelists have some great information for you, so I will try to go through this briefly. A lot of students will ask the difference between mark sheets and transcripts. So the most important part of your application is going to be your academic results. And those are the ones that are reported on your transcript. So your transcript is basically the document that includes all of the courses you completed during high school or secondary school, the grade you received for each specific class, and the number of credits or credit hours for each of those courses. Okay, mark sheets are a little different in that they are less comprehensive and may only summarize the information that you would normally find on a complete transcript. Mark sheets, may be acceptable in some cases, but it's probably best for you to submit a complete transcript so that we as admission officers have all of the information we need to evaluate your application. Okay. As you prepare these documents, it's really important that you have them issued in English. And if that's not possible, then they need to be accompanied by English translations. And you would need to make sure that your grades are included for the past 3 to 4 years. Okay, it may vary depending on the university you're applying to. So it's important that you contact these schools to find out what grades or what years you need to submit grades for. Okay, official versus unofficial transcripts. Again, you'll want to find out whether university requires official or unofficial documents. Official documents are basically documents or transcripts that are sent directly from your school to the university without you seeing or touching them. On the other hand, unofficial transcripts are documents that you possess and that you are submitting on your own behalf. Okay. Each university is different, so again, do your research. At my institution, for example, we will accept unofficial transcripts as part of the application, but we require official transcripts if a student is accepted and decides to enroll with us. Okay. When we look at your transcripts, we will calculate a GPA, or we'll use a GPA to determine your admissibility. Some schools will use a core academic GPA, and some may use a cumulative grade point average. So a cumulative grade point average is exactly that. It's cumulative. It includes all of the courses that you've taken in secondary school, whereas many schools will use what's called a core or academic GPA. And what that means is they will use a select group of courses that they'll consider for the GPA or some other criteria that they've established. So at my institution, for example, when we calculate a grade point average, we only look at English, math, science, social studies, and foreign language classes. Okay, so we don't include classes such as art, business, law, music, PE, or theater. Okay, now this GPA is typically lower than what would be reported on your high school or your transcript. But it's fair in the sense that everyone is being evaluated based on the same type of courses. Okay. GPAs can be weighted or unweighted. So universities may decide to give you bonus points or credit for taking more rigorous courses. So at my institution, for example, if you take an AP, an IB, or an A-level class, we would count a B as a 3.5 instead of a 3.0. So that would be a weighted GPA because we're giving you credit for taking a more rigorous class. An unweighted GPA is without the bonus point. So if you took a AP class and you received a B, the university might count it as a 3.0. That's an unweighted grade point average because you're not receiving any bonus points. Okay. So when you're researching your schools, it's important to know whether universities are reporting unweighted or weighted GPAs, so you get a general sense of how competitive you might be for that institution. Okay. Need blind versus need aware. So some universities will consider an applicant's ability to pay for their education as part of their admission decision, and some universities will not. So when you hear the term need blind, that means a university does not pay attention to an applicant's ability to pay when making the admission decision. Okay, so a full pay student and a student that would need a full scholarship would be considered just the same. When you hear or see the term need aware admission, that means a university is going to consider an applicant's financial need when making a decision. Okay, it may not be the most important consideration, but it is something that they will take into account. Okay. So for example, my institution is need aware, and that means that we'll only consider an applicant if they're able to verify their ability to pay for a minimum amount. Okay, and that's typically about 50% of our cost. Again, it's important that you do your research to find out the schools you're interested in, whether they are need aware or need blind, so that you're not wasting your time by applying to schools that you may not ever be considered for. Okay, and finally, I'll just go through deferral and waitlist. There are two types of deferral. The first deferral is when you apply for early admission at a university, and that school decides to defer your application to regular decision. Okay, this may be because you didn't complete all the required documents, or it may mean that you weren't competitive within the early applicant pool to receive an admission offer. The second type of deferral is when you have been admitted to a university, but you decide that you want to take a gap semester or a gap year for a whole range of reasons, but basically you're deferring your admission and planning to start at a later date. And finally, then a waitlist offer is when a student is academically qualified for admission to an institution, but that applicant may not be competitive within the overall applicant pool to receive an outright admission offer. So in these cases, a student may be offered a place on the wait list until the university is able to determine whether there are any openings available. And this typically happens around May 1, when accepted students are required to reserve their place. Okay, all right, I will wrap up there and pass it on to the next presenter.
So Paul did mention he may need to step away briefly. Maybe we can jump to the next slide. And then when Paul is able to rejoin us, we can get him going on this slide.
Okay, guys, so This next section here on personal evaluation, I think is really important, as these are many of the supporting items or the components that different admission offices look for when they do their personal evaluation of your application. And so the first one is your essay or personal statement. And so some of the things here to consider is, you want to have a really thoughtful personal statement that's uniquely really about you. That's your opportunity to share with the different institutions your something more than what we can get from our admission application or from your admission application. Make yourself, you want to make yourself memorable, and you want to make sure that your essay or your personal statement is free from errors. Grammar and length are important too, so pay attention to any requirements that may be shared with you in the different institutions that you're applying for. Recommendation letters are also important. You want to utilize the relationships with your high school counselors and teachers, especially the ones that know you best. One of the things that we ask that you try to avoid is, make sure you ask someone that can really comment on your behalf and that can share positive information about you. And so choose your recommenders wisely, because we do read those items. Extracurricular involvement is important as well. You want to highlight your strong points, and make sure you share with us things that we can't get from your application. What makes you stand out and what makes you different. We're trying to really recruit and enroll students that are standouts, and so this is going to be your time to brag. And so be sure that you include all of those items. Stay engaged. Correspondence matters. And so when we see that you have an interest in our institution, that's something that we note in the admission process. And so make sure you develop a strong relationship with your admission counselor or the institution that you're applying to, so that we have that interaction with you and we get to know you a little bit better through this journey that you're going on. So I think that's very important. And then make sure you also familiarize yourself with the different types of additional supporting items that some institutions or some majors specifically may require. So if you're looking at a particular art program, is a portfolio required as part of the admission process? It's evaluated either by the admissions office or the faculty in the different studio arts majors that you might be looking at. Really understand the requirements of that, because that's your chance to show your work. If it's an art program, if it's sports, and if you're interested in sports, be sure you understand what the particular NCAA division is of the school that you're applying to. Is a tryout required? Do you need to visit with the coach? Does the coach need to see you perform? Do you need to turn in a video? Or what are your stats? And so all those questions are what you want to ask either of your admission counselor or of the particular individuals that maybe the admission office is pointing you towards in that direction when you enroll or when you pursue these different institutions. And then other factors to consider as well, optional recommendations. A good rule of thumb sometimes is when a particular institution says that something is optional, you may want to submit it, because that helps just strengthen the quality of your application. And so if any of you are working, a recommendation from an employer may be something that gives a different perspective than some of the academic folks or your teachers and your counselors that they can comment on your academic abilities. Or maybe the head of your school would be important as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Attention to detail in addressing documents. Be sure that you answer all questions that are being asked of you. Be sure also that you are able to follow the directions that are on the different supporting items that a particular institution may be requesting, because all of that is very important. The needs or the goals of the university is something that we take into consideration as well, and something that you all should be aware of as incoming or potential students. Do some universities have a particular number and type of student they're looking for? That does exist, and so that's something important to keep in mind for yourself. An international focus. If a particular institution has international specific scholarships or international specific summer programs or things like that, that's important to keep in mind. Choice of major is something that we take into consideration as well when looking at possible enrollment pools. Interviews may or may not be required. In some institutions, an interview is required of all international students, and in others, it is not. You always can request an interview with an admission counselor or a staff member to offer kind of that extra level of depth to your application. And I think everyone, especially on this call, will probably welcome interviewing or visiting one-on-one with prospective international students. And then always keep in mind too that there's legacy and family ties to the university that may be important for a particular institution. And many of us may offer scholarships for legacy students and so forth. So be sure that's where that close communication with your admission counselor comes into play, so that you can be sure to really develop that relationship and just kind of offer a strength to your application. So I think we're going to go back to the previous.
If you can do actually slide number 4, Ryan, for Salve Regina, and then Paul will close us out after that.
Right there.
Great. We'll try to rush through because I know there's another session right after this. Hi, everyone. It's Ron Beck from Salve again. I'd like to give you a few tips on preparing and getting ready to apply for universities. The first point I said would be to follow instructions. Some of us have very specific things in our application forms. Maybe there's a short answer or a specific question we want you to respond to. But type carefully. Some students type very fast and they invert the digits in a postal code, or they may create misspellings as they're typing so quickly. So take care and do good housekeeping when you're filling out the forms. A good idea is to use the name that's found in your passport and be consistent using it on all the forms. If your name is different or missing from documents, they won't match up when they arrive in our offices. So, check that spelling and be consistent with your name. As Ryan was saying, also look to see if there's an admissions counselor who's responsible for your school or your country. Send them a greeting, have them answer any questions, and save that person's email address. You may also need to create an application account for each university you apply to. We don't make this very easy for students, but save your usernames, your passwords, and your student ID numbers for each university you apply, so you can know you can get into portals and you can get into information that you need to keep everything accurate and up to date. You'll often receive a confirmation email after submitting an online application. If you don't get a confirmation, be sure to hit the submit button correctly and make sure the form is filled out correctly. And speaking of email, use the same email address throughout the college search process. Some people recommend creating a professional email account, but whatever you decide, monitor your messages regularly. Email addresses that include your name are really greatly appreciated. Thanks.
And finally, and I'll do this very quickly because I know we're running out of time, just a few words about academic evaluation. So of course, a big part of your application is your academic history and your academic background. And the number one point that is being looked at are the average of your grades, or your GPA. And so it's not all about, you might just think the higher the better, but there are other ways of looking at the GPA. In certain cases, they're looking at the trend over time. Were they rising, or did you have falling grades in your 4 years of high school? Some universities require you to apply to a specific major, and those majors may have more strict requirements looking closely at science or math grades, or what types of math classes that you've had. So it's not just the GPA. It also could be like, what courses did you take? Did you take pre-calculus in your final year, or did you take a sequence of 3 different years of sciences? So they are looking at a lot of details in those transcripts. Again, sometimes the SAT or ACT is required. Sometimes it's optional. And the optional thing is becoming more and more common among universities in the United States. If you're not from an English-speaking country, you will probably have to do an English proficiency test, the top 3 being TOEFL, IELTS, and my favorite, Duolingo, because the Duolingo test, you can take it from home and you don't have to pre-schedule it. So, those are basically the key factors that we're looking at when we look at academics.
And Ryan, if you want to just jump right to the end, we've put all of our contact information there for you. If you'd like to take a screenshot, or you can return to the CCAA YouTube page. I know that they're planning to post this recording. If you do have any further questions, or if you're interested in learning more about our institutions, we would all love to hear from you. So please do feel free to reach out, whether you're here live tonight or you're watching this recording later.